Hello there, I'm Alex, and I sell cheese for a living. As a cheesemonger and certified cheese professional, I have helped thousands of customers find their favorite cheese. Each episode, I'll share what I've learned from behind the counter as we dive into the vast, fascinating world of all things cheese. Welcome to the Modern Monger Podcast. This week's episode, we are going to talk all about protected cheeses and what that even means. There's a moment that happens in a lot of cheese shops to a lot of cheesemongers or cheese customers, and it's going to be a moment of curiosity, and a little bit of a question comes out, which is something along the lines of, isn't Parmigiano Reggiano just Parmesan? And the answer is yes and no. Because in one sense, they're both hard-aged Italian-style cheeses, but in another, much more important sense, one of them is a legally protected product tied to a very specific place, culture, and method. The other is not. The other is just regular Parmesan. Okay, so what's the difference? Today's episode, we're going to talk about the difference. We're talking about protected cheese designations, those labels like AOC, DOP, and PDO that you might have seen on a label but never fully understood. These designations exist to answer a simple but powerful question. Who gets to make this cheese? And where? Because for many traditional cheeses, the where is just as important as the how. Milk changes based on geography. Specific bacteria that changes based on the environment around it. Even aging caves can shape flavor. So when a cheese becomes famous, there's a pretty big concern. What happens when the rest of the world wants to start copying it? And that is where protection comes in. Most of these systems are rooted in Europe, where food traditions are deeply tied to regional identity. Over time, governments and organizations stepped in to protect those traditions, not just for cultural reasons, but for economic ones too. If anyone anywhere could make Roquefort or feta, the original producers would lose what makes their product special and valuable. So today I'm going to break down the three major systems you'll see. We're going to focus on AOC from France, DOP from Italy, and PDO, which operates across the European Union. We'll talk about what they mean, why they exist, and how they actually affect what ends up on your board. And we'll also get into the messy part, because not every country, especially the United States, likes to play by the same rules as everyone else in the world. Let's start in France. AOC stands for Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée, which translates roughly to Controlled Designation of Origin. This system started in France originally for wine and was later expanded to include cheese and other agricultural products. The idea is simple. If a product carries an AOC label, it must be made in a specific region using traditional methods and meet extremely strict quality standards. Today, many of these cheeses are also recognized under the European Union's PDO system, even if the AOC term is still commonly used. France has a long history of regional food identity. Cheese isn't just cheese, it is tied to the land, the animals, and the centuries of technique needed to make it. Without the protection it has, producers outside those regions could replicate the style and undercut the original makers. Some well-known examples include Camembert de Normandy, Roquefort, and Comté, each of which must be produced within its designated region and follow specific traditional methods to carry the AOC label. Take Roquefort, for example. It is one of the earliest known examples of a legally protected cheese. Dating back to a royal decree in 1411, it must be made from sheep's milk and aged in the natural caves of Roquefort-sur-Souzan. Those caves aren't just tradition, because only there can they provide a unique environment for the mold that defines this cheese. If you make a blue cheese anywhere else in the world, even if it tastes familiar and is made in a similar fashion, it cannot be legally called Roquefort under the AOC rules. Now, you'll often see cheeses labeled as Camembert style that are made outside of Normandy. While they may use a similar recipe or technique, they are not produced within the protected region and therefore cannot carry the AOC designation. The same applies to generic blue cheeses. A blue cheese made in another part of the world may share visual and flavor similarities with Roquefort, but without being made from sheep's milk and aged in the specific caves, it does not meet the requirements. You'll also encounter industrial bloomy rind cheeses that are designed to resemble traditional French styles. These are often made with different milk sources, more controlled production environments, and faster timelines, which places them outside of the AOC protection. In all of these cases, the cheeses are valid products in their own right, but they do not meet the geographic and production standards required for protected status. In Italy, they have something called the DOP, which stands for Denominazione Origine Protetta. My Italian is horrible, but it means a protected designation of origin in Italian, essentially. And it is Italy's version of the same idea, tying a product to a place and a process. And why it exists here, Italian food culture is very, very deeply regional. Think about how different northern and southern Italy are, not just culturally, but agriculturally. DOP ensures that iconic products remain tied to their origins and aren't diluted by imitation. Some of the most recognizable DOP cheeses include Parmigiano Reggiano, Gorgonzola, and Pecorino Romano, all of which must be produced within specific regions of Italy and follow strict production standards to carry their names. Parmigiano Reggiano is one of the most tightly controlled cheeses in the world. It can only be made in specific provinces using raw cow's milk and aged for a minimum period under strict supervision. Every single wheel is inspected. If it doesn't meet standards, it gets downgraded and cannot be sold under the highly coveted name. Now, a common example is going to be just Parmesan, produced in the United States or other countries. While it may be inspired by Parmigiano Reggiano, it is often made with a different milk blend, different aging standards, and outside of the designated Italian regions. Because of that, it cannot be labeled as Parmigiano Reggiano under DOP rules. You may also see cheeses described as Gorgonzola style. These products aim to replicate the flavor and texture of Gorgonzola, but they are not produced within the protected areas of Italy or under the same regulatory standards. Similarly, Pecorino style cheeses made outside the designated regions may use sheep's milk, but they do not follow the exact production methods or geographic requirements needed to qualify for DOP status. In many parts of the world, especially outside of Europe, terms like Parmesan have become generic. Within Europe, however, Parmigiano Reggiano remains strictly protected and highly enforced. Now we can take a look at the PDO, which stands for Protected Designation of Origin. This is the broader European Union system that essentially unifies protections like AOC and DOP under one framework. If a cheese has a PDO label, it means every part of its production, milk sourcing, processing, and aging must occur within its defined region. As the EU formed, there was a need to standardize protections across countries. PDO ensures consistency and recognition across all member states. Some well-known PDO cheeses include feta from Greece, manchego from Spain, Gruyere, which is protected across Switzerland and parts of France under specific regional agreements, and halloumi from Cyprus. Each of these cheeses must be produced within defined geographic areas and follow strict standards that govern everything from the milk used to the aging process. Feta is one of the most interesting cases. Under PDO rules, true feta must be made in specific regions of Greece using primarily sheep's milk with up to 30% goat's milk allowed, and it must follow the traditional methods of making. Halloumi is a PDO cheese from Cyprus, and its protection is relatively recent compared to some of the others we've discussed. For a cheese to be labeled as halloumi under PDO rules, it must be produced in Cyprus and follow very specific guidelines. It must be made primarily from sheep's and goat's milk, although a limited amount of cow's milk is allowed under current regulations. The cheese is known for its distinctive layered texture and its ability to be grilled without melting, which comes from the way it is heated and folded during production. If a similar cheese is made outside of Cyprus, or if it relies too heavily on cow's milk or skips key steps in the traditional process, it cannot be legally called halloumi within PDO protected markets. In the European Union, only Greek producers can legally use the word feta, but in the United States and other countries, feta is considered a generic term. That means you'll find cow's milk feta, domestic feta, and all kinds of variations that would not qualify under PDO rules. In the case of feta, you will often find domestic versions made from cow's milk, particularly in the United States. These products can be similar in texture and use, but they do not meet the PDO requirements of being made primarily from sheep's milk and grease. Manchego-style cheeses produced outside of Spain are yet another example. While they may use similar techniques or even similar molds, they are not made in the La Mancha region and therefore cannot be labeled as Manchego under PDO rules. You'll also see Gruyere-style cheeses made in other countries. These cheeses may follow comparable aging processes, but without meeting the geographic and regulatory standards tied to the original designation, they remain outside of PDO protection. These cheeses can still be of high quality, but they do not fulfill the full set of requirements needed to carry a protected designation. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, okay, I understand these labels exist, but how does this actually help me when I'm standing in front of a cheese case? If you've ever looked at a wine label and felt like it was speaking a different language, you're not alone. But once you learn how to read it, it becomes a shortcut. You see a region, you see a grape, a designation, and you can start to predict what's in the bottle before you even open it. Cheese works very much the same way. When you see a protected name on a label, it's not just there for fun, it's a big glaring signal to you that what you're holding is special. It tells you where it was made, how it was made, and more importantly, what it's likely to taste like. For example, if you see a name tied to a strict designation, you can start forming expectations right away. You know it's going to follow certain rules, use specific milk, and be aged in a particular way. That means the flavor that you're about to purchase isn't random, and as long as you read the label and understood it, it is a guided and informed choice. And I think that's where some real value exists here. If you can get these all down, you're not going to memorize terms. You're going to learn how to make better purchasing decisions. Because once you understand these systems, the label just becomes a preview of the product. And you can anticipate the saltiness, the texture, and the intensity, compare similar styles from different regions, and then you can decide if something is traditional or more flexible in its interpretation. And here's a little important nuance. Not every protected cheese is automatically better. And not every non-protected cheese is less good. That's not what I'm getting at. Any cheese can be made well, and any cheese can be enjoyed, but the label really indicates its intent, not necessarily its quality. There can be an excellent PDO cheese that you may just hate, where it has an American counterpart that is your favorite cheese. That's fine, but knowing the difference is key. A protected designation usually means that tradition is being followed. Consistency is prioritized, and the place it's made matters. A non-protected version, on the other hand, often allows for more freedom in production, a little more experimentation, different milk or methods, and a style that is inspired by tradition but not strictly bound to it. And both can be excellent. But again, like I said, understanding the label gives you the context, and it gives you the chance to make an informed decision. So it doesn't really matter if it's cheese or wine. The more you know how to read a label, the less you're guessing, and the more you are choosing with purpose. Now, if we were to go back to the United States and talk about a more complicated layer to this, the United States does not follow the same system or strict geographic protection for most cheeses. Although it does recognize some names through trademark and certification systems, instead, many cheese names are treated as generic terms. That means that terms like Parmesan can be made anywhere, feta can be made from cow's milk, and brie does not have to come from France. Even though some specific names, like Roquefort, are still protected in the United States. And why the difference? Why does that matter? I believe it largely comes down to history and trade routes. Many European immigrants brought cheese-making traditions to the U.S. and began producing their own versions. Over time, those names became just part of the general food vocabulary. From a U.S. perspective, restricting those terms would limit domestic producers who have been using them for generations. From a European perspective, it's about protecting cultural heritage and preventing dilution of the identity of the cheese. And this creates tension in international trade agreements. European producers want stronger protections globally, while U.S. producers want to keep using familiar names. And consumers are often stuck in the middle, trying to figure out what's authentic and what's not. And the biggest thing I can say is if you are looking for authenticity, look for the protected label. Now, to qualify for that protected label and to qualify for the protection like AOC, DOP, or PDO, a cheese generally needs to meet several criteria. It must come from a specific defined region, follow established production techniques, and it must maintain consistent characteristics in flavor, texture, and appearance. In many cases, it also carries cultural and historical significance tied directly to the region it comes from. Now, a cheese might not qualify for protection because it is made outside the designated region. It might use different milk, such as cow instead of sheep, or if it relies on pasteurization, where traditional methods do not, shortcuts aging or production processes, or is designed for mass production rather than traditional practices. And again, that doesn't make it bad, it just makes it different. And at the end of the day, whatever you like is the most important. But I will say it again, as long as you are making informed choices. Protection isn't about saying one cheese is better than another. It's, again, understanding what you're buying. When you pick up a block of Parmigiano Reggiano, you're getting a product tied to a specific place with strict rules and centuries of history behind it. When you pick up a block of Parmesan, you might be getting something inspired by that tradition, but made for a completely different purpose, often at a much different price point. They both have a place, but knowing the difference. That's what makes you a stronger cheese purchaser, and what has made me a better cheesemonger. And I think that's what this show is really gearing up to be all about. How to make cheese eaters enjoy more cheese, how to make cheese mongers better at selling that same cheese. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. My name is Alex, and this has been The Modern Monger.